we're very fortunate today to have Ambassador Peter Fahrenholtz, who, by my count, has been a diplomat in around 10 countries. Retired now. He's covered pretty much about 3 or 4 continents. So the breadth of knowledge and experience, we're going to try and see if we can take advantage of that and see what we can learn from that and where we are now. So Ambassador Peter Fahrenholtz, thank you very much indeed for coming on the program.
Well, thank you very much for arranging this talk. I'm very happy to be in Rwanda here. Indeed, I've worked in many countries.
Yeah.
I'm retired now. I've been ambassador in Rwanda for 4 years until 2016. And I'm very happy to be back here. And I have to say, I'm very much impressed to see the progress achieved in the last 8 years since I left Rwanda.
You've just answered one of my questions that I was going to come to later, so that saves us a bit of time, the difference between when you're here and now. But let's look at generally. I mentioned the number of countries in which you have worked, in which you have been posted. It gives us an advantage to try and understand what is happening now, because you've seen it all happening. So let me start with this. We are in Rwanda, and there is a great deal of noise at the moment, a great deal of tension between Rwanda and Europe. That sentence alone is a bit odd, because, why would there be any tension between somewhere as small as Rwanda, which, for anyone who knows it, is focused very much on its own internal development, and a very powerful bloc as Europe. So this is odd in itself.
Right, it is odd, and it's a bit sad to see that. Rwanda has recovered in an extraordinary way, almost unique if you look at the history. Has recovered from the genocide which happened 31 years ago. And now we see here a country which is peaceful, stable, and gives hope to its citizens, that things will improve ever on. And I think an important indicator for me is if a country has refugees fleeing the country,
yes,
right? Now, we have to note that there are many African countries where the population, or parts of the population, prefer to leave the country,
yes,
because obviously they don't have hope in the future in their own home country, and they want to look for the luck somewhere else. But here from Rwanda, as far as I know, there is basically no immigration from Rwanda.
Well,
yeah?
more even the other way around, actually. What is very interesting is that, as you rightly mentioned, of course, Africa is largely a young population, and most of them have dreams and aspirations, and they look at their own countries and they think we'll do better elsewhere, so they try to leave. What is interesting to me, I think, is that Rwanda is it's one of the poorest countries on the African continent, very few natural resources and so on. And yet it's one place, not only do young people not want to leave, of course, given an opportunity to go to richer nations, I'm sure a lot of them will, but there is a desire to be in Rwanda. Not only that, those who have had those opportunities to leave and have citizenship in other countries want to return to Rwanda. So there is a reverse migration for Rwanda. That I find quite interesting.
I completely agree. And as I said, it's a very important indicator if people feel safe in their own country, and if they have a hope of a better future, of a better life, then they will stay. And this is what actually we in Europe want to achieve when we look at Africa, because we do have an issue with the uncontrolled migration into Africa. And one of the objectives of development assistance has been to help to create conditions where people prefer to stay at home. Here, when I talk to people, I understand that they see a future here in their home country.
All right, so let's look at broaden it out a little bit, because what you've just described should provide, rather than tension, should provide a basis for good relations with Europe.
Right.
And yet we have, as I say, this rather odd tension, somehow illogical.
Right. No, you see, of course, on the one side there is the guilt factor, the shame factor, the failure of the Western community, of the international community, to assist, to give any help when the genocide began, or even before it began. There were so many indicators before. And then when it started on 7th of April, to stop it, you see. That's one factor. The other is, of course, we share many values with Rwanda. We look at the good governance, we look at the protection of human rights, we look at so many other of these values that we share. Then the fight against corruption and so on. We have so values, we share so many interests. We have many European companies operating here now, and we have the interest of a stable country in Africa, which is also a value in itself. And also, thirdly, Rwanda is, I would say that Rwanda is basically, in its foreign policy, open towards the West. You're more aligned in your values and interests towards the West. Also, most of your diaspora is in Western countries, right? You take also, I can say, many ideas from the West in how you deal with your governance and so on. So, in these three dimensions, we see a large alignment. You see, maybe that's why expectations towards Rwanda are much higher than towards other African countries. Maybe we expect things, that's one part. The other part is, I believe there's a lack of knowledge, of concrete information, of what is happening here in this region, you know. And I'm particularly worried about, when I look at the media in my country, the lack of knowledge and information about the genocidal activities ongoing in eastern Congo. We have already for many years, but particularly in the last 2 years, we have intensification of the persecution of people.
The Rwanda-speaking Congolese.
Of the Rwandan-speaking Congolese citizens who speak Rwandan, getting killed and targeted because of their language, because of their ethnicity. This is, for this we can apply the definition of genocidal action, right? So this has been ongoing. We know also about the hate speech ongoing in the region, in some neighboring countries, targeting a certain ethnic group, targeting specifically, I can say, the Tutsi. So this can be documented and observed easily in the social media and in pronouncements of
from the government itself,
from government, and so we can observe this, and we always said, and now here on the occasion of Kwibuka 31, we said never again. After 1945, the Holocaust perpetrated by Germany, and we said never again. And this is one of the reasons we established the United Nations. We reinforced the rules-based international order, and this rules-based international order is supposed to contribute to that such terrible activities like a genocide will never happen again.
Never happen again.
Yeah.
We're going to come to all of that in a moment, but I want to go back a little bit to this relationship with Europe. You know, if you look at pretty much any newspaper, any publication, Western publication, you will get this sentence that people almost seem to share, which is Rwanda is doing very well economically, but rights groups say it has a problem with human rights. Now, you talked about values a little while ago, and if you look around the world, if there is one country that doesn't have a problem with human rights, it is surely Rwanda. This is a one place where you have got the most challenging, really task of being able to grant human rights, individual human rights, to people who committed the most awful crimes. And yet Rwanda managed to do that at a time when it didn't even have the institutions to do that. There was a conscious effort to say, we will respect people's rights. And yet what you get are people claiming the very opposite of what is happening. Now, one can be charitable and say that there is a lack of understanding, but I rather think there is a deliberate misunderstanding of what is happening. There is an intention not to see Rwanda for what it is. You've outlined that on paper, Rwanda and Europe share very many values. Rwanda aims to have these values, some of their own, but is also open to ideas from elsewhere. And yet, there is this focus on trying to find things that are actually not verifiable, that are not tangible, to hold against Rwanda. There's this effort to do this, rather than say, let's welcome what Rwanda is already doing. This is very puzzling to me, and it's rather intriguing.
Yes, indeed. Well, when we look at the human rights performance, of course, no country is perfect.
Sure.
Germany is not perfect. No country in the world is perfect. There's always work to be done. But as I said, it's important to see that when you talk to people here, when you look at the migration movements, you don't see any migration out of Rwanda. If there were human rights problems here, people would go out of the country, right? Now, as you rightly said, the process of truth, justice and reconciliation that happened after the genocide was remarkable. We have now perpetrators who were sentenced, mostly in the Gacaca courts, who spent the sentence, came out being reintegrated into the villages where they came from and where they maybe committed their crimes. This is a remarkable achievement, not only of the state, but of every citizen involved in this effort.
It's very rare in global history,
yes,
sorry
indeed,
to interrupt, to be able to take the perpetrators.
Right.
And it's a particularly Rwandan concept, in that you offend against the community and you rehabilitate it back into the community. And you cannot do this without being very much aware, without concentrating very much on the individual rights of individual human
absolutely
beings.
right. You see, when you look at our German experience, our Jewish population, rightly so, decided almost completely to leave Germany and to move to Israel. Of course, they had a choice to go somewhere else where they would be safe, right? But they rightly, at that time, 1945, and the years afterwards, they preferred not to stay in Germany. Right?
People traumatized.
Of course, it's completely understandable. But here, as the government said, the first choice was to stay united, which I think means
it's extraordinary.
These two groups of people would stay together in one country and become Rwandans. And this, I think, is the important thing, is that we are Rwandans, I am Rwandan. That is the slogan where they are moving to. We have to understand, this genocide did not happen such a long time ago. It's 31 years. most of the people affected and who survived are still alive now.
Yeah.
Victims who were injured. I heard the testimonies yesterday of young people who were injured during the genocide.
Yeah.
And the family members who survived are still among us, and the perpetrators are also there. You see, this is something unique, and it does not, it's very rare in history.
Yeah.
Then to achieve a consensus of society that we want to do this. It's not easy. Also on individuals, it's not easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's not easy for a victim to then, after 10 years or whatever, to see this man there who killed family members, now being in the same village and living there.
Yeah.
To
This
accept
process,
this. This process is not, on a human level, it's not easy at all.
So we've got that, and then, as I say, on the face of what one knows about Europe, this should be a point of consensus. There should be perfect relations with Europe. Now, I keep saying relations with Europe, and I mentioned earlier that that sentence in itself is somewhat odd. So let's look at, let's break that down a bit and look at where this relationship breaks down. Rwanda is doing what Rwanda ought to be doing. And I think the focus, of course, is on the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I want to draw, just to set the scene on this, there are 3 dates that are hugely important in this. There is 1884 to 1885. There is 1960s, I don't know exactly when the 1960s, and there's 1994. The 19th century, 1884 to 1885, is when the European powers decided to divide a lot of Africa amongst themselves, and Rwanda loses a lot of territory to neighboring countries, including Congo, mostly Congo, but also Uganda and others. 1960s, the precursor to the African Union, the OAU, decides, look, we're going to leave these borders where they are, because it would be chaos to try and undo them. But the people that you now find in your countries are your citizens, and you have to accord them the full rights of citizenship. 1994, specifically in Rwanda now, they will have the genocide against Tutsi, which of course we're remembering this week in Kwibuka 31. The perpetrators and the planners of the genocide taken into Congo, pretty much escorted into Congo with their arms, with their everything else, where they continue to be part of the Congolese body politic. And they introduce the genocide ideology into the DRC, beginning to persecute those Rwandans that are now Congolese since 1884, 1885. This is essentially the simple thing.
Yes.
Why doesn't Europe get that?
Yes, absolutely right. This conflict, which had a prehistory, but let's say starting point 1994, is still ongoing. This conflict is still ongoing. It did not end in July 94. It's ongoing. I think this is what many people, many observers outside fail to understand. This conflict is ongoing, you see. And I believe it is absolutely scandalous that an armed outfit like the FDLR is allowed to operate inside Eastern Congo, armed and perpetrating crimes. It is completely unacceptable. If you want to make a historical comparison, which of course is lopsided and does not really, if you had a fully armed SS Nazi division still operating somewhere in Europe with the aim of killing Jews, nobody would accept that. Action would be taken to destroy this. Then I want to remind you that a few years back there was action taken against the ADF, which had moved into northeastern Congo. And I think even 1 or 2 Western powers contributed to trying to exterminate the ADF forces.
This is a Ugandan group.
It's a Ugandan Islamist group, outfit. So there, suddenly, military resources were deployed to try to destroy them. But what about the FDLR? You know, I've talked to FDLR leaders in the West. I've talked to them to try to understand them. And what I understand is clearly they have this genocidal ideology.
Yes.
It is very clear. They say so clearly if you talk to them privately. They admit to this freely. And in their most extreme variations, they will even admit that they would like to finish the genocide in Rwanda.
Yeah.
So that's very clear. We should have enough information about this. And by the way, Germany sentenced several FDLR leaders and we put them into prison. So for us, they are, at least for Germany, they are a terrorist organization, right? So
and for actually the UN, they're also a terrorist organization, but they don't act on this.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And I believe what we fail to understand in the West, most people looking at Africa, sometimes looking at Africa, and then mostly quite superficially, is the ongoing genocidal actions in Eastern Congo, and that this has to do with the FDLR and political ploys and stratagems employed by the government there. Also, I want to remind everybody that more than 1,000 persons indicted because of the genocide in 1994 by the International Criminal Tribunal, which was established by the United Nations.
Yeah.
So they were indicted by the International Criminal Tribunal. More than 1,000 of these people are still at large, operating at complete freedom.
Yeah.
More than 500 of these, as far as I know, are operating freely in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and probably lobbying and working relentlessly.
And they have political power, and they're part
against Rwanda, against Rwanda, and against the Tutsi in Eastern Congo. We have hundreds of them in other countries, including in some Western countries. Also, they're working relentlessly against Rwanda and Tutsi in Eastern Congo. So what we see then as a consequence, because it fits some interests, a sharp rise of genocidal acts in Eastern Congo. Okay, so what is the international community supposed to do? I believe we adhere to the principle of the responsibility to protect. We should protect these people from getting killed by some militias or even by some state forces. Okay, so why don't we do that? That is the question.
Now that is a very interesting question. Now you mentioned that you said there's a lack of understanding. I want to explore this idea that there is no lack of understanding. I think Europe understands perfectly exactly what the situation is. I mean, it's not that complicated. It's been mentioned enough. Rwanda has been talking about this for the last 31 years. So it isn't complicated. They don't want to understand it. Why do they not want to understand it? This is what I find puzzling. Where do they think their interests lie in that the causes of what keeps Congo into this state of permanent conflict, permanent crisis, is they think their interests lie there, rather than looking at how Congo can be more stable. Congo, as we speak right now, it is absolutely right that this conflict could end in a week if Tshisekedi, President Felix Tshisekedi of the DRC, sits down with M23 and looks at their grievances, which you've mentioned, the genocidal murders and so on against their communities. This could end right now. But Tshisekedi is unable to do that. Let's put him aside. What I don't understand, what is really puzzling, what I would like to explore with you, is that why doesn't Europe say, well, look, this is what should happen?
Right, I agree.
So one doesn't ask them to do anything, but just simply acknowledge the realities. Why not?
The solution would be to find a way to guarantee the safety of the population in eastern Congo, especially the Banyamulenge, the Tutsi population in eastern Congo, which would include disbanding, dissolution of the FDLR. I think that would guarantee the end of conflicts.
But Europe doesn't want to hear this. Why
Now,
is that?
to be honest, I'm also a bit puzzled. Okay?
Yeah.
You know, I'm not an active
I
diplomat.
was hoping that you would be...
No. You see, I'm not an active diplomat. I'm watching this from outside too. But I can tell you from my experience, you know, when people have conspiracy theories and they assume bad will, no, mostly it is incompetence and disinterest. Okay? I'm not saying... I think many actors in Europe truly lack the understanding. What I found now, looking at media in Germany and some other countries, is they don't see the scale of genocidal actions in Eastern Congo. It's not in the media. They don't see it.
I absolutely understand that.
They don't see it. And that needs to be remedied. The public in European countries need to be informed about what is ongoing there. Because this triggers, these genocidal acts trigger everything else. You see?
Let me put this to you.
If this information is not transported by the media or by anybody else, then they don't see a need to act on it.
Yeah, I do. Sorry to interrupt, but I want to bring us back to this. First of all, look, one cannot expect the public in, let's say, Germany or France or whatever, to be that interested in what is happening in Rwanda. That's all right. One should expect the media to have some journalism and depict the realities of what is happening. They don't do that. They follow a certain narrative. What we have here, we have the fact versus narrative, and the narrative is winning at the moment. I want to suggest to you that this seems to me to be deliberate. And there is, of course, some incompetence. But, you know, if we talk in generalities, Europe isn't incompetent, you know. European nations aren't incompetent. There is incompetence, but they are not generally incompetent, you know. They're perfectly able to grasp what is going on here. But I come back to this idea. They do not want to look at the actual causes and basis of the crisis. And that is, as I say, what puzzles. What do they think they gain by this constant state of
I would guess that there are two more factors at play. One is that some actors in Europe who have been involved as colonial powers in this region have believed that they have the right to follow certain policies and to go for certain in a certain way. The second is that, of course, the decision makers in Europe are mostly concerned with the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, the Russian aggression against Ukraine, right? This is the overriding foreign policy issue that we are confronting in Europe at the moment. So I would guess that foreign policy makers would look at everything else under this perspective. How does this fit in with the conflict Russia? You know, Russia attacked and invaded Ukraine, right? And they put forth also grievances about Russian, ethnic Russian populations in eastern Ukraine, you see?
Yeah.
But I'm not an expert on the Ukraine at all.
Sure.
Yeah, but as far as I remember, they did that, and this has been an issue for several years. So everything is subordinated to this.
But you see, I wonder because I mean we've had some journalists, some people in the media trying to draw this parallel, Russia, you know, Ukraine, Rwanda, DRC. It is ridiculous. Understand, precedes the Russia-Ukraine war. So this has always been there. And I suggest that maybe it's got something to do with Rwanda's independence. Rwanda takes a position that, look, we want to be friends and partnership with everybody, but we understand our sovereignty. Like every other nation, we have our own red lines. And I don't think that the Western world likes that. The Western world likes to say, you know, jump, and they want you to say how high. Rwanda will not do that. Rwanda will say, well, let's have a look. Well, we don't feel like jumping, you jump. And this they don't like.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying.
This is my suggestion. I want to put that to you in
may
your
be,
understanding.
Maybe true for some people, but things have changed. You know, we have developments in our thinking. You know, we have, especially in Germany. If you look at the German foreign minister, you know, she's not one. She's from the Green Party.
Sure.
You know, she's not one who would follow this kind of reasoning at all. You see.
Theoretically, she would be a very progressive, and
she's a progressive,
anti-colonialist,
very progressive,
but, you know,
anti-colonial, feminist person. You know, one of her principles is the feminist foreign policy. You see. So, and we have people with the same way of thinking in many European countries. So I don't think it is that. But we also have the other thinking that you mentioned.
Yeah.
That's also there. That's a kind of atavistic kind of thinking, which is fading out, but it is still there with some actors and decision makers. So you can find them also, especially in some countries, right?
So the atavistic thinking seems to have the upper hand right now. I mean, let's specifically look at Germany. Why isn't Germany? It is not, I think, throughout the 20th century and up to now, it would be unfair to suggest that Germany has imperialist ambitions.
Right.
That is a past. I think modern Germany does not have imperialist ambitions. And again, let me just say whereas you know, while you can have incompetence in any country amongst in any governments, we cannot apply incompetence to the German government, whatever the complexion of the government is in general. So we have this situation that is perfectly clear in Rwanda and in the DRC, and whatever relationship that there might be in the genocidal forces that you outlined. Germany could sit down with the relevant people in Rwanda, and within 20 minutes, it's clear. So why the deliberate confusion? And I can only say that this confusion is deliberate.
Well, no, I think you underestimate the lack of information, right?
Do I though?
The decision makers, they rely on reports made by certain groups within certain institutions and so on, and these are official documents being forwarded to everybody, and they don't, at least, you know, I can only speak for myself. I cannot speak for my government. It has to be very clear. We don't have any eyes on the ground in that area in Eastern Congo. How are we supposed to know what is actually happening there?
But you don't. Let me put this to you. I mean, I said at the in an introduction that we're fortunate to have you here. So let's look at it from your perspective. When I'd imagine there are decisions in the foreign ministry in about a country where the foreign ministry doesn't get first the advice of the ambassador, but generally out of thought. I mean, you can explain this if you would. Out of thought that if, say, Germany wants to have a major policy about Rwanda, they will speak to you first, will they not? And
to the ambassador?
Yeah. Yeah, as the ambassador, whoever is the
Not to
ambassador
me.
at the time. No,
Not
no,
to
as the
the
ambassador at
present
the time.
ambassador. Sure, they
yeah,
do.
when you are the
Yeah,
ambassador in
yeah.
Rwanda. At the time, they will speak to the ambassador,
Yeah.
and they will take advice from whoever the
They do.
ambassador is.
And I can say that the German ambassador here, she is very understanding of the problems that Rwanda is confronted with. But that's only one voice they listen to.
Right.
There are other ambassadors of each country in all
Sure,
the
but
neighboring
let's
countries.
take one
And then there's
specific
African
country.
Union, there's
Sure.
the United Nations,
Yeah.
there are the regional organizations. So that's a big chorus of
I understand, yeah.
of opinions
noise.
and noise,
White noise
and
coming.
data.
Yeah.
And the people are far away. They sit there. They try to find out what is the truth, what are the facts. You see, so many sources present information as facts.
Yeah.
Some of them are true, some of them are not true.
But you see,
But
I
how
think
can you discern the difference? I tell you, I believe it's truly a matter of not having a whole picture of what's going on in Eastern Congo,
But you see,
about the killings of people.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Yeah.
I want to come to that, but
Yeah.
I remain to be convinced that the issue is one of misunderstanding, because we're talking about very capable and very well informed people here. Again, let's just do, without being asking you to be too specific about individuals, hypothetically speaking, there is the European perspective, and there is the individual European country's perspective. I actually had the opportunity to interview the Rwandan foreign minister, and I put this to him. You have individual relationships with individual European nations. Why not just say, and these are highly intelligent people. This is, you have outlined it as it is. It is hugely puzzling, and there is a reason, I suggest, why people are not, or people are reluctant to acknowledge the truth as it is, the facts as they are. As I say, there is a narrative and there are the facts. And right now, the narrative is taking over the facts and is burying the facts. And people are choosing being the operative word, to go by the narrative. Why can't the foreign ministry say, let's not make it too specific, let's not put you in too much of an invidious position. Let's say, why doesn't the Foreign Office in France listen specifically to the ambassador of France here, who will say, as you put it, this is what the position is.
Yeah.
And instead, they go with this narrative where we end up with, Europe sanctioning Rwanda. As I say, that sentence in itself is bizarre.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I was not very happy with that decision. The
basis of that decision is what I'm
the
trying to get at.
ambassadors here in Rwanda can only speak for what happens inside of Rwanda,
Sure.
basically. Yeah. What is happening in the neighboring countries, they will listen to the ambassadors stationed in the neighboring country, and they are far away from action. Let's say they are in Kinshasa. They are far away from the action, whatever is happening here in Eastern Congo. And of course, they are under very strong influence of that government there, you see. So,
but I come back to the fact that these are highly, highly capable people. So the difference between what is nonsensical and what makes sense.
Do you really think so?
I think that you do. I think that you do. I mean,
I was fooled too several times. I believed something to be true, which then turned out to be wrong.
Yeah.
We are all humans,
Sure, I understand that.
As a diplomat, we try our best.
Yeah.
We try to be fair.
Yeah.
We have to weigh these different interests, values, political alignment. These three dimensions have to be balanced when we look at a certain country.
Yeah. Which is one should do, but I'm trying to suggest to you that isn't happening. The fairness, the analysis of what is happening. I mean, look, you have arrived at a clear analysis of the situation in the Great Lakes region, and you used, it is fair to say, your 4 years in Rwanda, but I would suggest if you're sitting in Germany in a foreign office, you'd still be able to look at these facts and say, well, actually, this is what is happening.
Yeah.
But they don't want to look at it. So this is what I'm trying to get at.
I've been looking at this region now for 12 years,
Yeah.
or even 13 years now. So that helps me to understand a little bit of what is happening. You know, I'm not an expert, but I'm beginning to understand things as they are. But as I said, for the policymakers far away, they're presented with a wide spectrum of opinions and facts, or facts that are presented as facts but are not true. What I think what needs to be done is to do some lobby work and to present the case of what is happening on the ground. If we look for it on the internet, we will find ample documentation of the atrocities committed against the population in Eastern Congo. Horrible things are happening there. If you look for it, you can find it. But you need time. You need time to look for that.
You need the will
and
to want to
the
look
will,
at it.
and then the time to look for that, to document it. Also, we have I think about 120,000 people from Eastern Congo living in camps here in Rwanda. I think most observers outside are not aware of these people. There's a lack of information. And it's right, decision makers in our country should make more effort to look for the truth and to look for the facts. But I think from this side here, there should be a better, more coordinated effort to present the facts to the Western capitals.
Well, in fairness, for 31 years, Rwanda has been addressing and presenting the facts as they are. And there is not a time, when Rwanda hasn't done. But the point is, nobody wants to listen. There is narrative versus the truth versus the facts, and they prefer to drive the narrative. So I want to put this to, insofar as you know, we had this G7 statement on the situation, condemning Rwanda again. Now, G7, to whom are they listening? Because clearly we have disparate countries. What do we have? We have Canada, United States, UK, Germany, France, Japan, Italy in the G7. All of them, I suspect that there's very little understanding of Rwanda and the Great Lakes region in Italy, for instance. But they all coalesce around this utterly ridiculous statement.
Well, I don't know.
To whom are they listening? That's what I'm trying to find
I don't know
out.
who was the pen holder for that statement. Who drafted the statement?
Exactly.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, the suggestion is Belgium. Belgium has been on a campaign to isolate Rwanda, to put sanctions on Rwanda, presumably because they want to appease Tshisekedi, because they want to curry favor with Felix Tshisekedi in the DRC. But here's a question to me, and this is one that I did put to the Rwandan foreign minister. Yes, fine, Belgium can do this, but you have relationship with individual European countries. So from your experience, let me put this to you. Why don't those individual European countries just simply say, look to Rwanda, what is going on here? Can you explain to us what this is? Why is it that they just simply offhandedly decide to sign this document and say, we'll impose sanctions on Rwanda?
They should do that. I absolutely agree. I mean, let's look back 31 years. The denial of the preparations for the genocide. It was there for everybody to see. When the genocide started, all the diplomats left, but still enough information was coming out of what was ongoing. But nothing was done to stop it. It could have been stopped easily.
Sure.
Yeah, just an order. As Kofi Annan has apologized for his failure, as we know, because he was the head of the political department. And instead of giving, and I know General Dallaire. I had long discussions with him about his failure, and if the order would have come to act against this government which began the genocide, it probably would have stopped. But instead he received the order not to do anything. And secondly, a short time later, his force was diminished.
I mean,
Yeah?
I
So
think that,
and everybody was, my point is, everybody knew what was happening,
but they chose
but
not
they
to.
did
But
not
you see,
do anything.
But you see, actually,
Yeah?
in a way,
So
that's a very good point. That's a very good
that's very
example you
important
give.
to see. We have, and this is not only there.
Yeah.
If we, I don't know about Cambodia, what were the circumstances?
Srebrenica.
1975 to
Yeah.
1979,
Yeah.
4 years ongoing genocide of, I think, more than 2 million people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what happened there. Why did nobody intervene? The Vietnamese intervened
Yeah.
in 1979
Yeah.
to stop this genocide.
Yeah.
Okay, so why is now we see something similar now? And as I said, I'm puzzled.
See, I want to suggest to you that
yeah,
this
I'm
is-
honestly puzzled
Yeah.
why we who have these high values, which is to protect the life of innocent civilians, that is the highest priority of any state actor, of any international organization. And if this widens to, this is the area of human rights, if this widens to ethnic cleansing and genocidal actions, it should be the duty of the international community to intervene. I absolutely agree. And I am puzzled about the turn of events, about this. Is it a denial? Is it. Yes, indeed.
See, I want to put to you that it is a conscious policy. There was a reason why they felt that at the time, say in Cambodia, this was let's fight against communism. So that's all they cared about. That was their policy at the time. And in the specific case of Rwanda here and the situation in the DRC, I have to come back to this. It is easily solved. It is really not that complicated. And as I say, either I'm completely misguided and completely naive, or if I'm right, it's actually startling to say that this conflict could end in 1 week, if that, if the obvious things are done.
Yeah.
And Europe understands that. Europe knows this. But Europe consciously chooses not to get behind this idea. And I think that they somehow think that their interests lie in not leading to the resolution of this crisis.
I would not really agree to that. I think most actors in Europe don't know that. They're not aware of the high-level leaders. They're not aware. They don't know. Obviously, some people are driving this with the intent that you are saying, and seemingly others agree to this consensus. But I don't think there is some kind of conspiracy among all of the European decision makers in this area.
yeah.
I'm sure if you ask the leaders in most European countries of what is going on, they either don't know what's going on or they will just give you the existing narrative.
Well, look,
Yeah?
they follow a narrative. I mean, you're rightly saying.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, one can't call it a conspiracy. People don't sit down and say, we'll do this. But they're all following a specific narrative, and they're doing so consciously, rather than just saying, let's understand what is going on here and follow that. So Belgium goes around to around the world and saying, isolate Rwanda, and because this. And this, they listen to this, and it suits them, rather than them saying, well, why? You know, the ambassador of XYZ country doesn't say, but we know Rwanda, we know what they're doing, so why would we do this? They don't do that. So they have chosen something, and I suggest to you that something is what they think is in their interest.
Yeah, but it's, you see, what do you know about the repression of an Islamic community in some Asian country? The ongoing human rights violations and even genocidal
You see,
tendencies.
I'm perfectly.
You see, we don't know exactly what's going on.
You see, I'm perfectly happy to
so-
say, for instance,
yeah.
I'm perfectly happy to say that there's somebody, people in any European Foreign Office cannot tell me the difference between the Tutsi community, Banyamulenge, the
They don't
Hema
know.
community. That's perfectly
They don't
okay.
know.
But they're perfectly able to understand, as you rightly put it earlier, that there is the persecution of certain minorities in this place, and these certain minorities, and because of that persecution, these minorities have taken up arms to fight for protect their communities. I mean, we have a situation, and everybody's rather coy about mentioning this, so we should mention it. We have a situation where people are beaten into semi-consciousness, burned alive, and cannibalized in the DRC, and people are ignoring this, and this is the genocide ideology that leads to that. And people are consciously ignoring this. So what is going on here? You know?
No, as you know, I completely agree to this, and I've seen so much evidence about it. But you see, this crisis is one of 100 ongoing crises in the world, and if decision makers don't have their own eyes on the ground, what do they rely on?
They rely on, they test what Rwanda is telling them.
Yeah,
and
they
say,
listen
let's
to,
have a look at that. But they choose not to.
They listen to what Rwanda is telling them. They listen to what the DRC is telling them. They listen to
and then they evaluate
what the UN is telling them. There's, I think, a panel or group of experts. They have written reports. Then there is this UN mission there. They have the written reports. So they have all these documents and statements there.
The UN's advisor on the prevention of genocide, more than a year ago now, made it clear to the Security Council that there are conditions that existed in Rwanda in 1994 of genocide. They ignore that.
Right. Okay.
And this is the basis. Let's be clear about this. M23 fights to protect its community. Whatever you say about them, that is the basis of that. They don't want to be burned alive and cannibalized. This is very
absolutely right.
That is what they fight.
Right.
Now, you would have thought it is not very complicated for very advanced, highly advanced nations to come and understand these facts. They're choosing not to. This is what I come back to time and time again. They're choosing not to.
No, it should not be like that. You know, in the ideal world, it would not be like that. Maybe when I think about it, the problem is that outside observers are saying that, and this connects to the Russian issue, which should not be, because these are two different.
But as I say, this
problems.
also predates the Russian issue.
These are two different problems, and each problem has to be evaluated according to its own conditions, right? Yeah, but the issue is the claims that Rwanda's military are operating in the DRC, right? So I don't know anything about that.
But Rwanda has explained this. Rwanda has explained this. I mean, and Rwanda has made it clear, and again, in a way, verifiable facts attest to what they're saying. Which is what they're saying is that we are being for over 21 up to 30 years, we've been constantly attacked. Therefore, we are on alert. And recently, you had about 3 or 4 major attacks against Rwanda. By the way, any country in the world would have actually invaded Congo by now. You know, Rwanda has been attacked 3 or 4 times. The neighboring city, the neighboring district of Rubavu, has been shelled several times. And there are, of course, constant attacks by the FDLR. You know. Any country in the world would say, this is an act of war. We're going into the DRC. Right. Rwanda hasn't. Rwanda has said, let's resolve this through international mechanisms. And yet, Europe ignores all of this. And I'm saying to you that this, I'm suggesting to you, I think, and I want to really understand from your experience of the way these things work, why it is that they choose to do this.
My advice would be to ramp up information targeting the Western countries to present the facts. You see.
But how? Target who? Let's actually just
see, that's what
follow
the,
this.
what the other
let's
side
say
is doing. Lobby groups.
Let's say that one that's paid you as a
lobby groups and political influence, but also going through the media and public relations.
The media is following. The media lacks journalism.
But why do they that?
Well, they follow. They follow the narrative.
Why are the mainstream media not willing to go to Eastern Congo?
They follow the narrative.
But why do they do that?
Because a lot of the media are owned by the same influential people who have chosen a narrative over the facts, and so they follow a narrative rather than have the courage of their convictions to follow the journalism. Now, this is with honorable exceptions, and there are very, very few now who actually look at the situation as it is in the DRC and present that. Everybody's following the narrative pretty much. Now, what I'm trying to, let's go back to where you started, which is, you know, Rwanda has done all it can. So, but you're suggesting there's something else that they could do. Let me say, forget about the lobbyists, because they have their own interests. You know. Rwanda has got the access to, you know, the foreign offices of these individual countries. You know. Now, I would suggest, I don't know, I would guess they would have, they will have had those conversations before. But if they have those conversations before, I mean, let me give you a very good example. The UK Foreign Secretary, the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, was in Rwanda not too long ago.
Right.
And he did have conversations with President Kagame. He goes back to London and imposes sanctions on Rwanda. Now, I am pretty sure that that conversation would have been cordial, and he would have been given the full information of what was happening in the region, but he chose not to abide by it and went with a narrative instead. Now, that is presumably happening in every other European Western nation. So, who is listening to whom, and to whom do you speak?
Well, as I said, I'm puzzled. I'm not in the system anymore, and I tell you, in 2012, we did not follow, Germany did not follow the narrative.
Yes.
If you remember 2013, we were the ones who opened up the cooperation with Rwanda again. We broke out of this, you know, when I was there as ambassador.
So imagine, I mean, if you're puzzled, spare a thought for me. I have no idea
puzzled.
at all.
I don't like to think about conspiracy theories, because that would be very sad if there would be a conspiracy targeting to weaken Rwanda. What sense would that make?
Exactly.
But what sense would it make to weaken one of the most successful countries in Africa with their history, just out of historical vindictiveness or whatever reasons, or just because they apply some rules of international law?
And a country whose values align with yours.
What sense would that make? It doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, let me suggest this
that would
to
be
you.
very sad. If that would be true, it would be would make me very sad.
Let me suggest something to you on a line along which you've been thinking. In 1994, everybody, as you say, knew precisely what was happening in Rwanda prior to the genocide against Tutsi, during, and even in the immediate aftermath. Everybody knew what was happening, but in the UN Security Council. But they chose to say, you know what, this is France's patch. We leave it to France. And I want to draw a parallel between this. You know, in I mentioned the 19th century, 1884 division of Africa among the European nations. Come back to the 21st century, they're doing exactly the same thing. They're saying, you know what, we are going to leave this for Belgium.
But the Africans are fighting back, you know.
Well, but they're not winning.
And by the way, as I say, if neocolonialists come,
Yeah.
there are always two sides. There's one side which
Sure. No,
needs
I
to
agree with
accept
that. Yeah.
this
I agree with
neocolonial
that. Yeah.
influence,
Yeah.
one side which exerts it, and one side that accepts
Well,
it.
what I
So-
can say, I have to understand that since we've had at least 40 years, 50 years, where they can just say, well, look, this thing did happen, but this is our reaction. And I accept that Africa needs to react better. But I want to understand, we talked about, you know, it's not so much a conspiracy, but I want to suggest to you that it's not a conspiracy, but there is an accepted policy, which is where Europe has now said, as they did in 1884, 1885, now in the 21st century, they're saying the Great Lakes region, we allow Belgium to dictate things, and therefore we have this ridiculous notion where the G7 signs a statement that has nothing to do with the facts, only because Belgium asks them to do that.
I don't know what's happening in Belgium. I think they have a lot of immigrants, of people who escaped Rwanda in 1994 and then came to Belgium, and these people now have risen to positions of influence, and maybe they influence foreign policy making. You know, if the
So
children,
essentially, people with the genocide ideology are influencing Belgian policy.
could
This
be,
is what we're saying.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be. Yeah, I've met people, Europeans of Rwandan descent who fled 1994, who are now grown people. They are in important positions, and once I begin talking to them about Rwanda, I was in Rwanda, and when I say I appreciate Rwanda, then they become so negative immediately.
Yeah.
These people have not been back
You
to
become persona non
Rwanda
grata,
for
yeah.
30 years. They still carry the hate inside their hearts, even though they have never been back.
They're frozen in 1994.
Yeah, they're frozen there. They're not the victims. They were the perpetrators. But they still carry this hate.
Yeah.
It's so irrational, and it is so sad to see that. If the victims would have this hate towards the perpetrators.
Yes.
You see, now that I mention it, do we have this? Do we have hate of the victims here against the perpetrators? No. I cannot
quite
find
the opposite.
that.
Well,
I cannot find that.
Yeah, people
Maybe
are
somebody
making-
still have resentment deep down, but there's no public utterance,
Well, look,
hating,
my
hating the
understanding-
perpetrators.
yeah,
You see, it's very important. Why do the perpetrators still hate the victims
Yeah.
so much? I don't have an answer. This goes down into the human existence, the human essence, you know, and it is very bad. And
in a way, I suppose, is to you don't like somebody pointing out your worst.
Yes, the shaming.
Qualities. Yes,
if you
maybe,
shame somebody,
maybe the mere existence
Yeah.
of sometimes even the forgiveness, people resent that. So the mere existence
Yeah,
that
it's
in a
true,
way
yeah.
that people want. This is in a way, I suppose, what genocide denial is about. Is you want to erase the very idea.
Absolutely,
of people, yeah.
absolutely. So in Germany, we try to do exactly the opposite. We support Israel, even now, because we have a clear policy of our responsibility towards the Jewish people.
Well, look, I could talk to you for hours, and unfortunately, you don't have that much time. So let's, as we come to an end, let's end on, I don't know, really exploring the specifics, because all the opportunity that we have with you is that you've got a broader understanding of these things. And while you cannot say specifically what the policies are, you can suggest, you know what the underlying basis of things are. So we are where we are, and you suggest that the best that Rwanda can do is increase the attempt to make people understand.
Yes.
But all right. I mean, in a way, I suppose Rwanda will continue to do that. One suspects they won't need an invitation to do that, so they'll continue to do that. But I also want to suggest to you that they have been doing that, and there is a refusal, and a deliberate refusal to listen to them, because there is a rather bizarre notion that Europe's interests lie away from a country which is doing what on paper Europe says ought to be happening. So this is where we are at. So what does Rwanda do in that situation?
You have to try harder. I'm sorry. I think you have to try harder. And I would advise the government to be very transparent about. I mean, they are.
This is the thing.
To be completely transparent about everything they are doing and what they want. And they're doing this anyway, but continue being completely transparent about all actions. Redouble their efforts about informing the Western public and decision makers about what's ongoing in Eastern Congo, and present the solution. The solution is guarantee the safety of people living in Eastern Congo, which includes dismantling of the FDLR. I think we agree, if we had this guaranteed in a sustainable way, the conflict would end immediately, right?
But also the conflict would end immediately if the UN Security Council, if the European Union, actually just a statement, said, instead of this ridiculous G7 statement, they had a statement that's saying, we believe that President Tshisekedi should sit down with M23 and negotiate.
But that would be one step. That would be one step in the process. The end result must be safety for the populations, especially the Tutsi population, Banyamulenge in Eastern Congo. And then for this we need also, among other things, a dismantling of the FDLR.
But the low-hanging fruit right now is we want an end to the conflict. That end to the conflict can easily come with the grievances for M23 are very clear. And by the way, there were agreements in, I think, 2012, 2009.
I agree. I think there needs to be
Europe
talks.
And the UN Security Council could simply say, well, look, this is what needs to happen.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. Yes.
But, I tell you what.
But you need to mobilize your friends. You need to mobilize the public. I'm very happy to contribute my small part that I can do to find a way forward for peace in this region, and everybody who has the goodwill should do that. The goodwill to do that, you see, as Christians, as modern people who believe in that good solutions are possible, we have the ethical, moral responsibility to do that. We have a moral responsibility. When we look at genocidal actions, we have to go beyond foreign policy actions. It becomes a moral imperative to do something. We cannot say we do this because of that, this kind of foreign policy activity, balancing different factors and so on. No, when we look at genocidal actions or genocide, it becomes a moral imperative to take immediate, decisive actions. If not, we also become guilty.
Complicity.
You see? Complicity, yes. So I'm sorry to say that so clearly, but this is what I strongly believe as a German and being a diplomat, and I've studied genocides. The Armenian genocide, which the Turkish still refused to acknowledge, you see? In 1916 or 1915, the Cambodia. I studied genocide, and I say we need complete. This is why I proposed an idea on the panel.
This was the conference on
the international conference on Never Again is failing. I proposed that within the framework of the UN reform, genocide prevention should be one of the main priorities of the UN, and within this framework, a trigger mechanism should be introduced, a trigger mechanism that when genocidal actions are perceived anywhere in the world, automatically action needs to be taken. Compulsory. There should be no consideration, yes or no, or veto power, and compulsory action would need to be taken immediately, starting with an observation mission on the ground, and so on and so on.
The right to protect.
And this should happen anywhere in the world where reports are coming out about genocidal action. An automatically triggered mechanism to prevent genocides. This is what I would propose to be installed. What will happen now, these mechanisms take too long. You observe, you write reports, Security Council, then maybe there's a veto, maybe not. So this needs to be automatic. Yeah, that would be one proposal to take up and to take to the United Nations.
Ambassador Fahrenholtz, thank you very much indeed for your time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I wish all Rwandans in this time all the best. And I respect their resilience when they look back on the genocide 31 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much.